So first of all, I'm going to go into the origin of this project and then say a little something about the problem that we're trying to address. And then after that, we'll be going into exactly what it is we're producing for the Regenerative Economics project, with a specific focus on how Doughnut Economics shapes the work that we're doing. And then lastly, we'll be talking about the how, the kind of next steps if you'd like to engage further in regenerative economics. Now, the first little bit of information here for the first few minutes repeats some information that we've done on other webinars. So if you've joined us in the past for some webinars on regenerative economics, this will look familiar to you, but we'll be through that in about 6 or 7 minutes or so, and then we'll be moving on to more specific information about how Doughnut Economics shapes the work. So the origin of the project. I really like talking about how this project got started, actually, because it actually came out of the work of 2 student organizations. So 2 student groups in the UK, Students Organizing for Sustainability in the United Kingdom and Teach the Future, also in the UK branch, launched a project several years ago where they asked academics and teachers to rewrite the entire national curriculum in England, every single year level and every single subject, to include sustainability. And their thinking at the time is that there might come a point in the future when the government would change and they would look at revising the curriculum, and they wanted to make sure that that they had documents ready to support any kind of new curriculum change ready to go. So because of some work I had done on sustainability and economics in the past, these 2 student organizations asked me if I would work on economics and also business. And but unlike some of the other subjects in the national curriculum, it's not so easy to bring economics sort of in line with sustainability goals. It needs a much bigger transformation than just making small tweaks. And given the size of the task, I asked Kate Rayworth, the author of Doughnut Economics and professor at Oxford, whether she would help me, and she agreed. And the 2 of us, she brought in a few more academics and I brought in a few more teachers. And then together we completely rewrote, first of all, the GCSE syllabus in England, and then later the A-level syllabus. That was published, that work was published in 2023 in May. And at that point, I decided to leave my job as a teacher to bring this project to life. I didn't want it just sitting around on somebody's table on a piece of paper, on a digital document. I thought it was a great springboard to try to launch a movement to get change in the way we're teaching economics in secondary schools worldwide. There had already been movements at the university level, for example, through Rethinking Economics, but that this would be really the first major attempt to try to get change at the secondary school level. And so that was the birth of the Regenerative Economics project. Now, I'd also like to take a little detour here to just spend a few minutes talking about the problem that we're trying to address with these curricula, because it will then help you understand why it is we've taken the approach that we have with regenerative economics. So, as we are all surely aware right now, we're experiencing multiple interconnected crises, which go by different names, the poly crisis or the meta crisis. These crises are connected. We're talking about climate crises, we're talking about mass migrations, pandemics, the development of AI without guardrails, the epidemic of mental health issues and loneliness, and the rise of right-wing parties. Our contention, and not only ours, but many people's contention, is that the root causes of this meta crisis have to do with the way our economies function. That our economies, through reinforcing feedback loops of inequality and an ever greater extraction of resources from the earth, are actually weakening social and ecological systems. They are degenerative by design. And unfortunately, instead of helping us address these problems, our economics courses are actually perpetuating the degenerative economies that are responsible for these crises that we face. And this really matters because powerful people have economics degrees, people in politics, in media, and in business, or if they don't, then their advisors do. And the economic worldviews that we teach in our classrooms, both in secondary schools and tertiary education and beyond, shape how people act, their mental models of what the economy is for, and all the decisions that they make. So we have to look very carefully at what it is we are teaching people. And my argument is that that needs to start also as early as high school, because we have economics courses that are using degenerative models from the age of 14 in some places in the world. Now, if we're to look a little bit more closely at what these courses are teaching, I've developed this slide to kind of capture a lot of information all in one place about what these courses look like and why they're a problem. So fundamentally, the issue that we face is that these courses draw a very narrow system boundary around markets, and they treat markets as though markets are the economy. And in fact, when you ask students, even before they come into economics courses, like on day one, they've already internalized this message through media, through their communities, through their families, that when we talk about the economy, we're talking about markets or money. So this narrow system boundary, these courses explicitly draw this narrow systems boundary. And what that means, having this narrow systems boundary, means that the state is a marginalized actor. So you can see the state up there outside the system boundary in these courses. We even use language that shows that we are thinking about the state as a kind of external actor. We talk about the state intervening in the economy as though the state is somehow outside of it, that the state imposes regulations, that taxes are a burden. So the very language that we use helps make this kind of marginalization of the state very, very clear. We don't think of it as a provisioning institution necessarily in its own right. We think about it only to the extent that it intervenes, it imposes or places burdens on what is the real economy, which is markets. Then if you look in the lower right-hand corner, we've got society and the environment. So to the extent that these courses talk about social and environmental problems, these are usually found in a section of the course on market failures. We even use the term externalities to refer to these impacts on society and the environment, showing again that we've pushed these two things outside the boundary of markets. And we don't even really have a language to talk about these impacts except through the lens of markets, through the lens of market failure, as though markets are the default way of organizing for human beings. And then in the lower left-hand corner, we see we've got household care and domestic work and the commons. So the household and the commons are two extremely important provisioning institutions in our economies, but they're more or less ignored. The household, when it's talked about at all, is usually talked about as a consumer of things that markets make, occasionally also as a provision of the labor that markets need to operate. And the commons, if it's ever mentioned, usually has the word tragedy with it, as though it's impossible for human beings to organize around shared resources to meet human needs. These two elements of the economy, especially household care and domestic work, there's nothing in our economies that would function if household care and domestic work itself doesn't function. We need households, and that's the primary place where care and human well-being is fostered. And commoning is happening all over the world in every single community. It's particularly important in indigenous communities, and it was the main way that humans organized themselves for millennia. So, but we don't include these in our courses. So this is one issue. But even when you look inside at of these courses, at how markets are treated, we see some really disturbing things that are being taught to our young people about them. So first of all, the models that students are taught have some pretty damaging assumptions behind them, that human beings are selfish, that they aim to maximize their own personal utility, price as a metric of value. Endless and aimless growth is both desirable and possible in these models that students are using. Profit maximization is a core assumption behind all the models that students are taught, and that might not sound like a problem on its face, but when you peek behind the curtain of what it means to maximize your profit, what that means is that you're using whatever power you have to squeeze every other stakeholder, your employees, your suppliers, nature, the government, the states through avoiding taxes, etc., that you're using whatever power you have to take as much as you possibly can from every other stakeholder in the economy. So this profit maximization assumption is hugely damaging. And then finally, on day one, we implant the idea in students' heads that there is not enough in the world for everybody, that scarcity is a prevailing condition. And scarcity has two parts. First of all, that resources are limited, which is true. But the other piece of that, for there not to be enough, we also have to make the assumption that human needs and wants are unlimited. We actually tell students that this is a fact. No one is ever asked to unpack that assumption in these economics courses. And by setting out scarcity as a fundamental assumption to start the courses and develop the models, everything from the production possibility frontier to supply and demand and everything that's built on those, we're setting out a kind of mental model that because there's not enough, it means that human beings have to relentlessly compete to get their fair share. And it justifies, it kind of sets up an ethical or moral justification for wealth hoarding, for taking as much as you possibly can out of the economy, with all of the kind of socially and environmentally damaging consequences of that. So with this one slide, I tried to capture quite a lot of the problems of the way we teach economics now. And what I'd like to do at this point is to then tell you what it is we're doing to try to reframe economics for a more regenerative future. And so at this point, I'm going to move on to, if you've attended one of our webinars before, we're going to talk about what we're producing, but we're going to specifically then also be looking how Doughnut Economics shapes the work that we're doing. So the first thing I'd like to show you is this diagram. This diagram is called the embedded economy diagram. It's kind of like the sister diagram to the Doughnut Economics model, which is much, much more famous. But this diagram is actually completely critical to understanding also the basis of the Doughnut Economics model. In Kate's book, in Doughnut Economics, she talks about this, what we've done here, as one of the 7 ways of thinking like a 21st century economist, and this is about seeing the big picture. So in the course that we've developed, instead of drawing a narrow systems boundary around markets, and you can see markets are still in that diagram, what we've done instead is we've widened the systems boundary right out to the edge of Earth's systems. And by doing that, we achieve many, many really desirable consequences for these courses all at once. So one thing that widening the systems boundary does is to bring about more complex systems thinking, because you're introducing more parts of the system and you're also talking about more of the relationships between the parts. And this opens up many more possibilities for increasing the complexity of students' understanding of how our economies work and what they're for. It also makes it possible for this course to become more interdisciplinary, which I'll show you another slide in just a minute so you can see what I'm talking about. But if you're widening the systems boundary, you can already see that you probably would need to know at least a little bit about basic ecology in order to study the economy. And in fact, we think this is extremely important because you can talk about sustainability all day long, but if you don't understand why it is that we need to be careful about the resources that we're using or the disturbances to these systems, then your motivation and incentive for actually behaving in a more sustainable way might be undermined. So knowledge of basic ecology is there, but there are other interdisciplinary consequences to this as well. We see this as a really vital piece of ending human nature dualism. So if we widen the systems boundary, it becomes much clearer that human beings and all of our economic activities are embedded inside all of the rest of nature, and that we are part of nature. And likewise, widening the systems boundary enables us to integrate relatively seamlessly multiple economic schools of thought. So we can, as it should be quite clear, bring in some ecological economics, quite a lot of ecological economics into the program, but also, for example, feminist economics, which pays a lot of attention to the unpaid work that is primarily done by women all over the world, and many other schools of thought as well. So widening that systems boundary just brings a huge number of really positive consequences for these courses. But I want to unpack this diagram just a little bit more because Kate does this also in her book. In the course that we've developed, instead of just having markets and states and addressing those two, we have added two other provisioning institutions, the household, where all the unpaid care and domestic work happens, and the commons, which are the self-organized communities managing shared resources, everything from land to digital and cultural and scientific resources. We then, in this work, we've positioned the economy as being embedded inside society. And what that means is that in the work that we've done, we've been able to weave in values, power, narratives, history, law, politics, culture, and social norms. So whereas your mainstream economics courses that we currently have attempt to push out many of these things, we've embraced them instead and acknowledged that our economies are sitting inside all kinds of other sorts of social relationships. And then finally, both the economy and society are embedded in Earth systems. That means every single thing we do, every breath I take, every cell in my body, but all the materials from my water glass to the water that's inside it, comes from living matter and materials from Earth systems, and that all of our activities produce waste and heat that then can go on and feed back into those systems, either negatively or positively, depending on how we have generated them. So this is the embedded economy model. And so this is the first big kind of move that we made to engage with Doughnut Economics, is that we have included that diagram. And I'm going to show you in just a minute how that plays out in our book. But a second move that we've made is we've taken this question from the Doughnut Economics cities and regions work that they've been putting together and actually put that at the very start of the course. So how can our community be home to a thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of people worldwide and the health of the whole planet? So I really love this question. I think it's an incredibly rich question, and it's one that students can come back to again and again as they're learning about economics to try to sort of deepen their understanding of how they and their community, those relationships at that local level, be home to a thriving people in a thriving natural environment while respecting everyone everywhere in the world and the health of the whole planet. So that's another core connection with Doughnut Economics. And the question, that question that I've just presented to you and the work in general, one of the things that we're trying to figure out as we engage in economics is how can we get into the donut? So the course is looking at all kinds of proposals that are on the table for this goal. So again, this is another difference between what a mainstream economics course teaches and what we're trying to do is that we've posited a very clear goal of getting into the donut, of meeting human needs within planetary boundaries. And that's something that we don't get explicitly in most mainstream courses. Where we do have a goal, if there's a goal at all, these courses typically center on economic growth. And we've moved away from that, not as a quantitative goal, but moving on to a qualitative understanding of how we can meet human needs within planetary boundaries. Yeah, so that purpose orientation is another connection with the donut. Now, I'm going to step back a little bit from the donut, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the work that we're doing, and then we're going to jump back into the donut. So the work that we do at Regenerative Economics has three main pieces to it. So the first piece, which might be the piece that you're most acquainted with if you've encountered our work before, is that in addition to the syllabus and specifications for a 2-year-long course, we have also written a book with 2 years worth of teaching material for teachers who want to take up teaching of regenerative economics, or students. It's actually written, the book is written for students, so students could even take this up on their own. And that book is being used by teachers and students, and we're also supporting teachers and students around the world. So in the left-hand corner there, we're working with them all over the place to help them integrate regenerative economics ideas into their mainstream courses, and also to find other ways of using the materials. And this is a nice reciprocal relationship because they're also giving us feedback on the work. But our big prize, and the thing that we're really, really going for is, and hoping for and working towards, is that we get changes in international and national economics curricula. Because many, I would say probably most teachers around the world who teach an economics course are required to teach a national or international curriculum, oftentimes with a high stakes exam at the end. And therefore, to get Doughnut Economics or any elements of regenerative economics into their courses, we have to work really, really hard. We have to make space for it. It involves risk-taking. It can be very difficult to get it in. Therefore, the fact that these curricula don't orient on these ideas is a problem for getting them adopted. So we're working hard to try to change those curricula. And the book helps provide that new alternative vision. It makes it easier to see if you're going to get, for example, if you decide that you're not going to teach some of these degenerative models, it helps you understand what you might be moving towards. And the teachers and students who are engaging this are also helping to provide the social proof and the social tipping points for change. And we have this really interesting window of opportunity right now because globally, mostly oriented in Europe, but also through the International Baccalaureate, and New Zealand is the latest to join in. But we have several countries and the IB who are engaging in curriculum reform right now. So the International Baccalaureate and the Netherlands are both revising their economics curriculum. They're already in that process, and we're contributing to those processes. Scotland and England are reviewing their entire national curriculum right now, and economics is included in that, although we're still waiting to hear whether England is going to take up economics specifically. We're crossing our fingers. And Ireland and New Zealand have recently announced that they're New Zealand is going to be reviewing its entire curriculum, and Ireland is about to start with its economics curriculum. And our theory of change is that if we can shift some of these institutions, at least some of the way towards regenerative economics, then we should be able to see some tipping points globally in secondary school education worldwide. And that's because these institutions tend to look at each other when they're making decisions about whether or not to change economics curricula. And unfortunately, because this is done, these curricula are changed relatively infrequently, very often, these institutions, these education authorities are looking backwards by as much as 10 years for guidance from other institutions. So what we're trying to encourage them to do is really to look forwards. These institutions who are making change. Instead of looking backwards at what's already there, let's think about something new and push this discipline a bit more in a regenerative direction, actually a lot more in a regenerative direction. Now, I bring all that work up because this is another really clear connection with Doughnut Economics, because one of the things that we've done when we are trying to encourage these curriculum authorities to change their curriculum in this direction is we've come up with 5 recommendations or 5 shifts that we're advising them to make in their economics curriculum. So the first shift that you see here on the screen is widen the systems boundary. I've already talked about that. Clarify the purpose of the economy, meeting human needs within planetary boundaries. That was the donut there. Embrace the complexity of human nature and behavior. So make sure that we're not only teaching students that human beings are selfish, utility maximizing individuals, but recognizing care and cooperation and reciprocity, in addition to the behavioral economics, which is already in some of the courses. Shift 4 is about replacing the linear and binary models with more complex systems thinking. So this might involve something as bold as taking out supply and demand diagrams and aggregate supply and aggregate demand, and instead replacing them with causal loop diagrams, which are faster to teach. They're much more intuitive for kids, and they allow for a much more complex interdisciplinary understanding of the factors that affect the economy. And shift 5 is about prioritizing experiential learning over abstract modeling. So this is in line with lots of research around the importance of young people spending more time in their communities, developing more relationships, spending more time in nature as a way, again, of widening that systems boundary and building the positive relationships in their lives that they need to be, to be happy and also to be positive contributors to their communities. So we have suggested these 5 shifts, and we've written discussion papers about these. Most recently, we're working on one for Ireland right now, which we're going to be publishing very soon with recommendations. And the connection here, I mean, you can see the connection with the donut, but I just want to emphasize that through these 5 recommendations, we've actually been able to capture the 7 ways to think like a 21st century economy from Doughnut Economics. So we're really working quite hard to take these basic principles that were outlined in this book and find some guidelines for curriculum authorities to really shift their curriculum in this direction. The next thing I'd like to do briefly is to just show you how Doughnut Economics is, how we've connected with it in the book that we've developed. And what you see here on the screen is the homepage of the Regenerative Economics website. And I've circled here on the left the textbook. So the textbook is embedded into the website. It's difficult for you to really understand, I think, how massive a piece of work this is. But what I can tell you is that there's enough material here to teach a 2-year-long course. So basically replacing what you might teach at A levels or in the IB or the CBSE in India or any other 2-year-long course that you have in secondary schools. There's enough material here for you to do that as an instructor. Now, I'm going to point out again how Doughnut Economics drives the way we put this curriculum and these textbook materials together. And the first thing I'll show you is this. So after we've got a section on systems thinking and an introduction to the economy, which I'll pick apart in just a minute, you can see here that we've got topics on the 4 provisioning institutions. So households, markets, commons, and the state. So that comes from these 4 provisioning institutions in the embedded economy model. The introduction to the course, these materials, these are all the different sections that are in that introduction. You can see there's quite a lot here. So after a brief introduction to the economy in 1.1, the very first thing we do with the students is go into ecology in the economy. And this gets back to what I was talking about before, that it's once you widen that systems boundary, it becomes very clear that you cannot study economics appropriately unless you know at least the basics of some ecology. And so you can see here, after exploring the relationship between human beings and wider ecosystems, we've got 2 sections on energy, we've got a section on matter, we've got a section on how ecosystems function, on biogeochemical cycles, and we focus really only here on the water and carbon cycle, which many students have already been exposed to in their science classes, and then finally on planetary boundaries. And then after that, we go into society and the economy. So again, looking at the embeddedness of the economy inside wider social systems. So we address the issue of human nature and values and human needs. The Doughnut Economics model gets explicit treatment there. All of the provisioning institutions get some explicit treatment, as well as care, reciprocity, power, freedom, narratives, etc. Michelle.
Just really quick, if you want, I put 2 chapters in the text in the chat box, the embedded economy model and the Doughnut Economics model, if you want to use those.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. So so that's how the introduction. So the introduction frames the embedded economy model already from the very start. And then you can see these 4 provisioning institutions are given explicit attention. Topic 6, which you can see here, is on money and finance. We have completed half of that section. We're in the process of working on the final revisions for the other half. And then there will be a 7th topic on international exchanges that is coming hopefully don't want to make too many promises, but I'm hoping by the end of the year. So let's see. If I were to kind of think about the role that Doughnut Economics is playing here, there are several ways where Doughnut Economics really has a starring role. So you've seen already the embedded economy model that is framing the structure for the entire book and the work that we do, as well as specifically topic 1. We have section 1.3.4, which is explicitly on the Doughnut Economics model. So it's written for teenagers to explain the model, and there's activities there for them. Subtopic 3.3 has 5 sections in it, and it's devoted completely to the Doughnut design for business. So you might not be aware of this, but the Doughnut Economics team has put together some amazing resources for business. And these resources are really excellent for business studies students, but also if your economics course has the possibility for addressing business design, then these resources are excellent for you. So there's 5 whole sections on that. And then section 5.3.8, which is 5.3, is all about rethinking the economic indicators or the economic goals of the state. Living in the Doughnut, then all the work of the cities and regions group is included in section 5.3.8. So that's where we see Doughnut Economics like with a real starring role in the book. But in addition to that, Doughnut Economics has like a really wide-ranging supporting role through the whole work. And when I was preparing this presentation, I did a quick search for the Doughnut in the search bar on the website. And you can see here, this is the first page of listings for where the Doughnut is mentioned or used in some way in the book. And there were 7 pages of these already, even though the book isn't quite finished yet. So you can see it just comes up, it's woven through the entire book in reflections, in activities, woven into the text of the book, etc. So it's really just infused with the Doughnut. And here's an example. Now, I was going to show you this on the screen, but actually I'm going to go into the website itself. Michelle, can you just tell me very quickly whether you can see the website now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I've just pulled up the section 5.3.4 on degrowth, just so I can show you, if you've not seen this before, what the textbook actually looks like, how it's structured, and then I can show you how we've used the Doughnut in one of the activities there. So yeah, 5.3 is all about rethinking the economic goals of the state. There's a ton of material here in 5.3, which actually I'll just scroll down here. You can see all the sections about economic growth, price stability, unemployment, well-being indicators, and living in the Doughnut. There are loads of things. So even if you're teaching a mainstream economics course, you can weave in new economic thinking with the materials in this section. Now, the way the textbook is organized, each of these sections, is that you have at the beginning, everywhere, there's always some helpful prior knowledge and learning objectives. These are connections to other parts of the book that are relevant. It does not mean that students have to have studied this before they can do this section. It's just providing some connections. And then there's a learning objective that comes out of our specifications there. Now, there is always a kind of hook at the beginning. In this case, it's about a trial of a 4-day week in Spain. And so we always try to start with an interesting story or an example of something to try to draw students into the work. Then we've got the main text or kind of knowledge input, and this is all about degrowth, what it is, and what various strategies there are for the degrowth movement. And you can see it highlights all these various strategies, which I'm just going to scroll down through. So that's kind of like the main, what you would think of as traditional textbook input. We've also got the concerns about degrowth strategies as well. So presenting those too. A little video embedded into the platform. And then we've got activities. So we've got anywhere from 1 to even 5 or 6 possible activities. We've tried to make every activity doable within one class period. So we've tried to be very, very practical. So teachers who want to pick this up but have a limited period of time, that there are activities that they can do. And So this one, the first activity here is the one that I wanted to show you about getting into the donut. And basically, in this short little activity, students in pairs or small groups, they pick one of the degrowth strategies that is discussed in the text, and they have to try to figure out how that degrowth strategy would help meet human needs within planetary boundaries. And they're expected to consider both the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. And then they can share these ideas with another group or class and then have a discussion about which strategies the class thinks might have the most impact on getting into the donut. And I've also noted that this activity can be done as a jigsaw where groups are learning about one of these strategies and talking about it and then regrouping with others who have taken on a different strategy where they can explain them to one another. But you'll see here there are other activities here: green growth versus degrowth debate or discussion. There's a UBI versus a universal basic income versus universal basic services discussion with some statements here that students have to classify first, and then they can have a discussion about these two strategies. And then this one is about how degrowth might be able to address the economic growth systems traps, which is, there's a section here, 5.3.2, about these system traps, which I'm going to come back to in just a second. Now, so every single subtopic here is like this. So you can imagine, and it's structured this way with the learning objectives, the hook, the main text, the activities. After the activities, we have some, let me scroll down here. We have some checking for understanding questions. These are auto marked for the students. They actually asked for these themselves as a feature. Then we have further exploration. So these are some additional links about, in this case, about degrowth. So students are really interested in this. We've tried to find some age-appropriate links for them to pursue. These are all the sources we use to write the material, which you also don't often see in a textbook. And then we've got a list of terminology, including a list to a link to interactive flashcards that students can use to practice vocabulary and learn new vocabulary. And we also always have a feedback button. So if you find something that you think should be changed, or if there's something that you really like, you can use the feedback button. So I'm going to go back to my slides. Michelle, can you confirm that I've gone back to my slides?
Yep, all good.
Perfect, good. So, no, I don't want to do that. Right. So another thing I'll just point you to very quickly, something that we have been spreading around with many teachers is a set of cards that enable you to do a donut connection kind of speed dating game. These were inspired by the Joining the Doughnut Dots activity that is on the Doughnut Economics website. And basically what these cards are, you can print them out front to back. They match up if you flip them on the short side. And these are the cards with all the elements of the social foundation and the planetary boundaries. And if each student gets one of these cards, then they can connect with a student who has a different card and then start trying to figure out what the connections are between them. So this is a very helpful way to start developing systems thinking. And if you do that kind of matching, and then students spend, maybe 4 minutes with one partner and then move to another partner and move again, they can really start seeing the connections between the elements of the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. So we have, and I will send to everybody who is on this call, I'll send this document, and if you like, you can print out these and use them in your classroom. These sets of cards are also extremely useful to just have sitting around because you can use them all the time. Like if you are asking students to consider the impact of a particular policy, for example, like some new tax policy, you can take these cards out and pass them around and have students thinking about how that policy might affect elements of the social foundation or the planetary boundaries. So it really does help them to move beyond this very narrowly constrained, these very narrow constrained models that you might have to deal with in your economics course. I also want to give a big shout out to the Hello Doughnut materials, which are the relatively new Doughnut Economics materials on the Doughnut Economics Action Lab website. I think Carolina, who is responsible for for education at Deal, is here on this call. So these are some really nice, really basic instructional materials for students of all age levels to start learning about Doughnut Economics. And some new materials around the embedded economy model are coming out, hopefully at the start of next year. And I also want to quickly point to the Doughnut Economics University courses materials. Kate and the team at Rethinking Economics put together some slides that they're lecture slides, basically, that address each of the 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. And these are also online on the Deal website and are really excellent resources when you're looking for nice graphics or very simple ways of explaining some of the material. One of the ways that we use them in our book, and that I was extremely excited about when these came out, is that the set of slides number 7 has some material on that explains why we're so stuck with the GDP goal. And one of the things that we've done in the book in section 5.3 on that I showed you just a few minutes ago is we have a section on system traps. So this uses system thinking, the idea of systems traps that comes from Donella Meadows' work to explain why we have been so stuck with this economic growth goal. And this is extremely important because if you've got your course where you're talking about economic growth and maybe you even have some room to start criticizing that as a goal, I think it's also equally important that students understand why we're so stuck with it. So this is, I think, really an amazing thing that I personally was able to take away from these Doughnut Economics University courses slides. So I'm really thankful both for all the Hello Doughnut work and also for this work on universities that is coming through on the Doughnut Economics Action Lab site. So just very quickly on the how, because you might be curious then how you might be able to pick these up and make use of them in your courses. So the most popular way that teachers are using regenerative economics materials in their courses right now is by sprinkling a little bit, seeding their courses with little sprinkles of regenerative economics material as and when you can. So this is really something that we see if you've got a mandated course like the A-levels or the International Baccalaureate, the CBSE, AP courses in the United States, etc. You can take little pieces of this and integrate into your courses. And on our website, we have started to map some of these course syllabi, so to make it easier for you to find where the footholds are in your courses for some of the regenerative economics material. So I would really encourage you to go to the website and check that out because your syllabus might actually already be there and then you can find the footholds relatively easily. A second way of doing this is that there are schools who have the possibility to run elective courses, either as a semester course, full year course, or even 2-year courses. In fact, we're working right now with the International School of The Hague, who decided to change their MYP4/5 2-year long economics course and instead to do regenerative economics in its place. But we also see teachers putting together units, semester courses, etc. We've seen teachers integrate these materials into other subjects, for example, environmental systems and societies in the IB, or to the theory of knowledge course. And we see the materials being used, for example, in choice topics in the Netherlands or the EPQ at the A-levels, or in project work, for example, as a part of the Indian national curriculum. It is possible also to set up self-study groups, so extracurricular groups or student-led groups to study regenerative economics as well. Like I said, the book is actually written for young people. And then finally, we would encourage you to participate in education institution reviews. So if you see a possibility to participate and to try to make your voice heard and start steering these institutions in this direction, we would encourage you to do that because the teachers are very often included in these review processes So it's really important that if you're in favor of change, that you take the opportunities to actually get a seat at the table, because that's the biggest way that you can make a difference. We have video explanations of the project on our YouTube channel, which we're adding to all the time. It's not a huge wealth of information yet, but we're slowly building it, including this video we'll be putting on there as well. If you'd like to stay in touch with us and with what's going on, I would encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. We put one out once a month, which has updates on the project, or follow us on LinkedIn, because we make announcements there as well, and also post lots of interesting things that we see coming through our feeds too. And I'll just make a quick plug for this. We are starting to do live in-person workshops as well. We did one in Amsterdam back in June, and we're going to do our second one in Brussels on November 20th in the city center. It's free, it's full day, includes lunch and refreshments, and we've got a limited number of spaces. There are still some spaces left. So if you're in the Brussels region and you're free on November 20th and are teaching economics, or maybe you're a teacher trainer, please come along. We'd love to have you at that workshop. And we'll keep you up to date with more workshops as we're able to organize them with partners. And that's the Regenerative Economics website URL. There's a QR code there too. We would encourage you to go there, check it out, explore, and see what you can find that might be useful to you. And that's the end of my presentation. I would really thank you for coming.